Hey there, everyone. It's Nina. Thanks again for joining me today. I'm so excited that you're here because we're going to be using the Simon Says Stamp and Hero Arts STAMPtember collaboration set. And this one's called Celebrate. It features a lot of really pretty florals, as you can see here with the stamp set on screen. I love how simple they are because they're really easy to color. Now, what's fun about this set is that there are two die options and you can get them all together with the stamp set as a bundle, or you have an option to purchase the stamp and the outline image dies as one set, or you can purchase the stamp set and the sentiments as another set. In case you didn't want all the dies, you can pick and choose which set you want. I'm going to be using both dies today to create my card project along with obviously the stamp set. So I'm picking out all the florals from the set. I'm going to use them all because I thought it would be fun to showcase how well they work together to create a really pretty wildflower scene. So I'm going to go ahead and line these up inside of my Misty tool. I am stamping them with VersaFine Clair ink in the Nocturne black color. This is a pigment ink. It is great for using with inks and watercolors. Any sort of water-based medium works really well with it. However, if you want to use it with Copics or other types of alcohol-based markers, you do want to seal this ink before you go ahead and color because this ink will bleed with your Copic markers. So I'm going to sprinkle the embossing powder over top of this wet ink. This ink is, like I said, pigment, so it will take a while to dry. And so that way it will give you the chance to be able to set this. So I'm using my heat tool to go ahead and melt the embossing powder. We get that really nice crisp black intense color here, which is great. It stands out really nicely. Now, like I said, I'm stamping all of the images, so I only stamped 3 for that first panel, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp the other 2. And I'll do the same thing, and I'll go ahead and sprinkle these with the embossing powder and then set it, so that way I can work on coloring. Whenever I work with Copic markers and embossed images like this, I always am careful not to color over the embossed lines. I've done this technique for many years, and I know some people say, oh, well, Copic markers and embossing powder don't mix. It can damage the tips of your markers. I've never experienced that, but like I said, I always color inside the lines. I don't go over the lines with my markers too much, so I've never had any trouble with this. I love how it looks. I love the intensity of the black lines. And I feel like it is a really great technique and a great way to be able to get a different look with your stamped images. Now, if you don't want to worry about going through the embossing process and you just want to simply stamp your images, then just use a Copic Safe stamping ink and you'll be just fine, and you can go ahead and color along with me. So I'm coloring the images with different shades of Copic markers that I've picked out, and all of them are linked below in the video description if you're curious about any of the colors that I did use. For most of these images, I used 2 shades of markers, but there were a couple of things like some of the flowers. I did bring in 3, and that was just because I wanted to be able to get a particular blend. But these images lend themselves to such easy coloring. They have a lot of open areas, and they don't have anything that's too tiny that you struggle to get your markers into, which I love. So it makes it a really enjoyable process to color these images. And I was going for a wildflower look here. I know I mentioned that at the beginning of this video, but whenever you see a field of wildflowers and all those bright colors mixed in, that's what I wanted to create here. So that's why I picked out quite a few different shades. And then after I finished up all of my coloring, I brought in the coordinating dies for the Celebrate set. And this is for the images. So because I'm going to die cut these all at once, I do want to hold them down with some tape to make sure that they don't shift inside of my die cut machine. I'm using very, very low tech tape from Simon Says Stamp to do this, and then I'll run these through my Big Shot. After die cutting, then I can just pop out all of my images and we're ready to start working on a background that they can sit on top of. I've picked out 2 different shades of Pawsitively saturated inks from Simon Says Stamp. This is Tidepool and Tropic. And I'm going to use Tidepool for the ink blending of my background, and then I'll add some stamping with the Tropic ink. I'm going to create a very soft ink blended panel here, and I'm only adding the color to about the bottom half of this card panel, which is 4 by 5 1/4, so it's slightly smaller than an A2 card. I'm going to use Tropic with this fun little trail image, these little series of dots that comes with the stamp set. And I thought this would look really pretty, kind of scattered around the flowers. And so I'm going to line up my flowers roughly. This is not necessarily the exact placement that they're going to be in, but I just wanted to roughly get an idea of where these images were going to be and how tall across my panel they were. And then I want just these dots to kind of almost be peeking out from behind them. So I didn't want them to be too high up on my panel, so I didn't want that stamping to be too high. So that's why I wanted to get a gauge of how tall the flowers were. Then I stamped my images across this panel. I also decided to add a little bit of splattering with some shimmer mist from Brutus Monroe, and I just picked that up with my brush and splattered that onto the background, and that'll kind of add to that little dot effect that's there. It just reminds me of like little petals floating through the air. So now I'm going to go ahead and pick out some foam squares in 2 different thicknesses. I've got thin and also thicker foam squares. These are from Simon's Stamp, and they're great for adding different heights of dimension across your project. And so I want some of these flowers to be popped up with the thinner foam squares so that they're not as dimensional, and then some of the other flowers that are going to be in the front, those are going to get attached with the thicker foam squares to kind of get that relief off of the ones behind. So I'm lining up my images across the bottom of this card panel here. I am going to have to cut off whatever's hanging off the sides just to clean it up. But this is going to look really cool. It looks like a little field of flowers. And then those little pieces that I cut off, you can always save some of those and kind of fill in your scene if you find that you want to fill in a hole, which I did. After cutting all of these off, I had a green leaf image that I thought would look great layered up along the bottom of the panel. You can see that empty spot down there. Pop that little leaf there and it fills it in perfectly, and you'd never know that it was missing something. So always save those pieces when you're cutting things off, because you never know, you might be able to pull one into your project. So I pulled out one of the sentiments from the stamp set, and we're going to stamp this with embossing ink onto some teal cardstock that I thought matched nicely with the colors of my card. I used white embossing powder for this, so that way I can go ahead and heat set that, and I'll get a nice bright white greeting then on top of this cardstock, which will stand out beautifully along the top of my scene. So I'll use the coordinating dies to cut this out, but if you don't have the coordinating dies for the sentiments, you could just cut this down into a little banner shape or fussy cut around it, and that'll give you a really nice piece that you can put along the top corner of your card, which is where I'm putting my sentiment. After attaching the sentiment, then I decided to add some glitter to my images. I'm using glossy accents for the adhesive, and I'm just putting a line of this along different sections of the flowers, one little line on every petal and leaf. That way I can come back in with my glitter, and this is Distressed Clear Rock Candy from Tim Holtz, and I'm going to sprinkle this over top of that glue. It'll pick up the glitter, and then that's just going to give me a highlight area. It almost kind of looks like there's maybe some dew on the flowers and leaves. Maybe it's early morning, and there's those little dewdrops sitting on everything. I just love that. It adds a little sparkle and shine. It enhances the images just a little bit, and I thought it was the perfect finishing touch for this card. I'm going to pop this card panel up onto an A2 card that I made from some pink cardstock, and that is going to do it. Simple, but so pretty. The colors of the flowers just jump right off the page, and I love that added touch of shimmer across the whole thing, from the shimmer in the background to the little lines of glitter that are on the petals and leaves. This stamp set is so beautiful. I think it's going to be a hot seller. As with all the STAMPtember collaboration sets, these are limited edition and only available while supplies last. So if you love it, you're going to want to grab it while you can. I have links to the stamp set and all the products that I used today listed below in the video description, so you can check these out. I appreciate that you stopped by and visited with me today. I hope you were inspired by this card project. It's a simple one, but I love the results, and I hope you will enjoy making something similar. So I'll see you again soon, friends, but until then, have a wonderful day.